Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our live stream for the newly released Alpha 7 Mark IV. My name is Sean Ellwood, and I'll be your host this evening. And we are joined by some very illustrious company this evening. So let me get straight to the introductions. First to join us, of course, our Digital Imaging Ambassador, Mark Gaylor.
Hi, good to be here.
Great. We also have Benn TK from Melbourne, Australia.
Hey guys, how you going?
Very good, mate. Good to have you aboard. We have Pat K, local. How you doing, mate?
Hello. Hey, Sean. How is everyone?
Very good, very good. Very glad to have you here. Another Sydney local, Julia Trotti. Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Hi.
And finally, we have from across the ditch, Rambo Estrada.
Greetings from the future.
And I know you were over here recently, Rambo. Are you still here, or are you back in your home country?
No, I'm back in New Zealand, yeah.
Very good. So just to quickly go around the table, Mark Gaylor, photographer, educator, and digital imaging ambassador. Ben, hugely successful YouTuber, filmmaker, all-around filmmaking whiz. Rambo, sports and lifestyle photographer, and generally great guy. And Julia, camera reviewer of late, but also portrait photographer. And then Pat K, professional photographer, YouTuber, and travel photographer of note as well. So we're going to be going through everyone's experiences with the camera, as well as looking at all the features, kind of just having a bit of a casual chat about everyone's impressions. So the run of show tonight, we're going to start off with a little bit of a fun thing that we did with everyone here before anyone got hands-on time with the camera. Then we're going to go through the features of the camera. So just step through the spec sheet and see what everyone's experiences have been of all those features. And then we're going to finish up with a Q&A, but we are going to try and seed in that Q&A throughout the show. So if you have questions as we're going, please just chuck them into chat, and we'll try to get to them as we go. But without further ado, we sent everyone a question about what they were expecting from a successor model to the A7 Mark III. So let's have a look and see what everybody said.
Alrighty, if there was a replacement to the Alpha 7 III, what features and specs would you put on your wish list for this camera?
30 megapixels.
32 megapixel sensor.
The stacked higher resolution sensor.
At least 24 megapixels again.
A higher resolution LCD screen.
A flip-out screen.
A full flip-out screen.
Flip-out screen.
The use of a vari-angled touchscreen high resolution monitor.
Higher resolution EVF would actually be amazing though for photography and for video.
The A7S III viewfinder.
A bright screen that you can see in sunlight.
Dual CF Express Type A plus SD card slots.
Dual CF Express card slots.
Dual CFS Express Type A card slots.
422 10-bit video.
10-bit color.
4K 120.
4K at 120 frames per second. 240 frames per second at HD.
New menu system.
HDMI input.
A full-size HDMI port.
Improved IAF and subject tracking. Bird IAF.
Built-in ND filter.
The better IBIS.
Active stabilization.
Better camera body ergonomics.
Close the shutter when you're changing lenses.
Better low light capabilities.
Better low light performance.
Add voice memos to photos with the Unreal.
Compatibility with the newest Sony microphones.
Independent settings for both photo and video.
All right. So look, some hits, some misses. Happily, I think a lot more hits than misses, which is nice to see. Maybe we might go around. What was everyone's biggest surprises in the new model? What did you see that you weren't expecting, Mark?
Well, when I first took it out of the box, the exposure compensation dial, I thought they'd forgotten to print the numbers on it. And then obviously digging into the menus, realizing that basically all 4 dials on the camera can be repurposed to 15 different functions, and it will remember those functions depending on whether you're shooting video or stills or manual or program aperture and shutter priority. So that was like, wow, that's the most customizable alpha I've seen to date. So that was excellent because I love customizing the cameras.
Yes, indeed. What about you, Ben? Any big surprises for you?
I think a huge surprise for me was definitely like the focus breathing compensation. That was that, like, for a videographer coming from cameras that don't have that, like, you always get that kind of that pulsation, and just to completely eliminate that was insane. And definitely the 10-bit color is just it's so nice to have in a camera, you know, especially from the last model.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, coming from the 7 Mark III, where of course you had like S-Log2, which has a huge gamut, but then it's so stretched out over 8 bits. It's
yeah, exactly.
What about you, Rambo?
That little the little switch to go to video, which is underneath the regular dial. Like, I was looking on the top for where the video was, and yeah, there we go. He's trying. There it is. Yeah, at first I was like, man, why the heck did they do that? And then, yeah, after I sort of played with it, it was super nice. It's easy to swap between video and photos without taking your eye from the viewfinder. And then it's awesome to be able to have like swap between all the modes on the dial. So it sort of doubles up that dial. It makes it like having 2 dials, like a designated video dial, I guess, for the different modes.
Yeah, I'd have to say that asking people that once they're dialed in the movie icon on the shoot mode dial, they have to dive into the menus to choose the exposure mode. It just was so counterintuitive that it's finally been resolved, which is great to see.
Yeah, it's something that I'd never really thought about before, but then now that it's on there, I'm like, probably can't live without it.
That's the way to go.
Julia, what about you?
I was kind of shocked that we had not only human IAF, but animal IAF and bird IAF in stills and video, because I'm like, this is an A1 feature and now it's in the A7 IV. So I thought that was really awesome. I like that.
Awesome. And what about you, Pat? Any extras? Everyone's picked the good ones.
Yeah, everyone's picked the good ones. But for me, two big things that apply to me, especially, is like S-Cinetone, because I'm just so damn lazy with editing my video and grading it. So like I thought that was going to be a like an S3 feature or an A1 feature or something like that, or like a Cine line, that kind of vibe. But the second thing is the live streaming thing totally caught me off guard, and it's like it ended up being really, really good. And you know, after it, I was like, man, this is such a 2021 move. Like, you know, everyone's doing conferencing and all that kind of stuff now, so like perfectly like makes sense. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I mean, definitely from a top line point of view, the idea was make a hybrid camera. You know, it's not a stills camera, not a video camera. It's something that you can really tune whichever way you want to go. And so yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and the fact that it picks up the microphone on the camera. So it's great. So you don't have great audio and then you ring around looking for the microphone. You've got great audio as well.
Yeah, we were chatting about that actually just before the stream. So absolutely. All right. Well, look, let's tick into it and start talking through some of these features, because we've got plenty to get through, certainly. I guess, you know, the heart of any new camera is going to be the sensor. And we do have a new one on the A7 Mark IV. Which feels super weird to actually be able to say A7 Mark IV. We've been talking in code names for so long now. 33 megapixels, backlit but not stacked. Mark, I know you've been shooting, really putting it through its paces. How have you found the extra resolution?
Yeah, look, for me, it's a big one. A lot of people don't understand how important resolution is as a still shooter. Even though I don't print, 3 feet wide or whatever, I still use the resolution to crop aggressively. Obviously, bird photographers will recognize that, we can't get as close as we would like. So what we do is we get as close as we can with the 400 or 600 focal length and then just crop in tighter. And obviously, a lot of people who don't want to overcrop because they know that the final image must fill a high-resolution 4K screen. The ability to shoot in APS-C mode and then crop again in post That 33 megapixel gives so many more possibilities than a 24. So I've got a slide I can showcase that if you like.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so let's just go over and I'll just pick that out. So this is the outer white box is the 7K resolution, and then the middle white box is the APS-C mode crop, which is a 1.5 times. So your 200 mil is already starting to behave like a 300 mil on the angle of view. But of course we can crop even further. So you basically got a 2 times crop on this camera. So, and as long as you're using G or GM glass, then there's no downside to cropping that aggressively, because as you can see in this running dog captured at 1/2000th of a second, every hair and whisker is pin sharp. And of course that brings me to that other feature, which is we have animal IAF and AF tracking together. You know, on the A7 III, you've got to have lock-on AF or animal IAF. You're not having both at the same time, whereas now we are. So this slide was from the A7 III shooting in APS-C mode, because the buffer on the A7 III couldn't last for the entire duration of the cowboy sitting on the bucking bronco. So I had to shoot in APS-C mode to stretch out the buffer. But then, of course, I don't even have enough resolution shooting in APS-C mode to straighten this image, because it's so tight on that 4K resolution. Whereas this is the APS-C mode on the 7K sensor. As you can see, we've got so much flexibility to reframe the image or straighten the image, even though we've been already shooting in APS-C mode, which is 14 megapixels. And there's 8.3 megapixels on the 4K crop, so very generous. So basically you could take out 4 4K images from this 7K sensor, you know, so that's great. You know, like, you know, I've been a little bit slack in tracking this dog, so it's got right over to the right hand side of the frame, but I've still got my image, you know. It's just great. So for people who are not professional sport shooters, this will make you look good, because as long as you can keep the subject somewhere in the frame, you do have the resolution for that 4K crop. And as you can see, again, pin sharp.
And Mark, we've got a question from the chat here. So Colin Chang asks, how does the AF tracking and performance of the A7 IV compared with the A1 and the A9?
Okay, so the stack sensors are a breed upon themselves. If you think about what a stack sensor is doing without using a mechanical shutter, it's got a constant stream of data from the moving subject. Whereas every camera that is not using a stack sensor, whether it be a DSLR with a mirror and a shutter or just a shutter, the camera is always trying to reacquire the subject after the shutter has moved out of the way. So there's always going to be a hit rate on sequences. Now, the hit rate of the A7 IV is much better than the A7 III because of its AF tracking algorithms, but it's never going to match an A9 or A1. So, I mean, you have to basically stay that. So you're looking at percentages of sharp images from a sequence. So you might say 70 or 80% is great, where often when I'm shooting with an Alpha 1 camera, I look through a whole sequence of 80 or 90 images, and there is not a drop shot in the whole sequence. And that is basically what the A7 IV is. A great basic camera, but it's not going to steal the A1's thunder.
And you know, Rambo, Julia, Pat, have you guys had much side-by-side experience with those cameras?
I have had the same experience as Mark, especially when it comes to shooting portraits, since that's what I do. When I was doing my autofocus tests with the A1 and then the A7 IV the other week, both cameras track the eye. Like, the eye's subject tracking is so sticky, doesn't matter what you do, even if you're running towards and away from the camera. But in terms of hit ratio with the photos, the A1 definitely wins in terms of that. The A7 IV is still amazing, but there is a bit of like a difference between those two camera bodies. So yeah, I found the same experience.
All right, excellent. Well, let's keep moving, because we that was the first feature. We have a lot to get through. So another thing that is really central to making pictures with this camera, whether it's stills or video, is the color rendering. You know, there's new elements to that for both video and stills, but just in terms of the stills color science, Julia, I know you've been doing a lot of, skin tone stuff, that sort of thing. How have you found it?
Yeah, good. I have some example images to show you.
Please, let me just solo you here. There we go.
Okay, so here's two images. This is a portrait I took of myself on the Sony a7 III with the GM35 1.4. And then on the same tripod with the same lens taken less than a minute apart, this is a portrait that I took on the a7 IV. So when you just see the images kind of like this, they look pretty similar. But when you start looking at them side by side, I am noticing some difference in color science in the a7 IV. I'm really loving like this new generation of Sony colors. I first noticed it with the a7S III, and then we saw those colors again in the A1, and now we have that same color science or similar in the a7 IV. And I feel like the colors and the tone are just very balanced overall. And I think the skin tones are really gorgeous in the a7 IV. I did a little portrait photo shoot in my review video. And yeah, the skin tones they look so rich, just even in the straight out of the camera JPEGs. So yeah, that's just like a little comparison.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think naturally, often, well, sorry, what am I trying to say? We started off, often with very accurate color, but when you're shooting accurately, you pick up a lot of environmental casts. There can be greens, there can be magentas. And accuracy is not always, the best thing. And, you do see with a lot of the late model cameras, just bringing more of those skin tones sort of into that tight band where they look good, they look rich, they look healthy. That's, just a nice little nudge to have.
Yeah, I should point out that I'm a RAW shooter, so all of that color flavors that Sony inject into the JPEGs, which would be going to my slot 2, testing a pre-production camera where you can't access the raw files through the Adobe software, you're really relying on those JPEGs. And sports shooters, would be relying on those JPEGs as well, because they might be capturing raw files to the CF Express card, but of course they're uploading the JPEGs to their picture desk. So yeah, it's good to have color science, even though you might be a raw shooter. So
yeah, absolutely. So other stuff that's been added in, we have, of course, the huge buffer on these cameras. I know a few of you guys have done the full, buffer test where you just empty, fill a memory card with pictures before you hit the bottom of the buffer. Yeah, by far and away, except for the A1 and 7S, pretty much the only cameras out there which are going to just fill the card before you touch the bottom of the buffer.
I got a question about the buffer today, Sean. It was like, can you record a movie to slot 2 while the buffer's emptying to slot 1? And I said, you'd never be fast enough to press the movie button.
That's probably not going to come up.
that the buffer's clearing to a CF Express card almost as soon as you're taking the images. We still have that vertical white line as an option showing you when the buffer's getting shorter, but it doesn't move.
That's right. It's a nearly meaningless feature.
It's a meaningless feature.
So, of course, on top of that, we've got some... we've tried to keep that noise performance really good on this sensor. So, classically the trade-off has always been you add in resolution, but you lose out maybe on noise performance. Julia, I know you put the camera through its paces a little bit for high ISO performance.
Yeah, in my review video, we set up just a little softbox on a very dim setting to test out the ISO, and I just shot at every single ISO that the camera had to offer. And as a wedding photographer, I tend to shoot a lot in natural low light scenarios during the wedding receptions. I love the way that it looks. It's a very nice style of image. And I found that on the a7 IV, I could comfortably shoot up to ISO 10,000 just in natural light. And I even found up to 20,000 and 25,600. You can start to see a little bit of noise appear, but it is still usable if you're pretty desperate for that natural low light. So it's definitely been an improvement from the a7 III. I think I was pushing maybe ISO 8,000 at most on the a7 III. So we have a little bit extra to work with on the a7 IV.
Great. It's good to have just a little, it's not a situation where, of course, you're seeing a huge stop or more of gains, but, it is kind of a nice little incremental gain to get. In terms of stabilization, of course, we do have like some small improvements to the in-body stabilization. We might come back around and talk a bit more about that when we get to the video side of things. But of course, one of the things that we have been really focused on across the board is autofocus, and I know you guys have been giving that a bit of a go. Now I know Mark and Julia, you guys have both had a chance to put it through its paces, but Pat, I know you've been doing a bit of street work with it. How have you found it while you've been shooting?
Yeah, it's like really sticky. I think one of the reasons why, for me personally, I switched from the AE7 III to the A7C was the real-time tracking. And while I love the A7 III, having real-time tracking that's super sticky in the 7 IV is just, it's so good. Subject acquisition is spot on, especially and it's especially tough in street because sometimes your subjects can be really small and they do unpredictable things. They walk around corners, they walk down the street and all that kind of stuff. And it was super sticky for me. So super happy with it.
It's good to hear. Mark, I might get you to share some of your impressions from the autofocus.
Yeah, I'll just take a look at that bird IAF if you want to share that screen. Obviously, in Melbourne lockdown, normally I would have gone to forests and looked for eagles or something, but this was just a wattle bird just around the corner from my home, and shooting with the 200-600. A lot of people have asked me how does the camera work with the 200-600, and I think if you look at this wattle bird with that beady red eye, you'd go, well, obviously it's quite happy on the A7 IV. So this was good. Look, and I didn't bother using anything other than wide AF here. And even when you got birds nestled in trees, as soon as the camera recognizes as a bird right in amongst the leaves and the branches, it just punches through. You don't need to select a small spot AF. It just hooks onto that eye and away you go. And of course, I do shoot a lot of running dogs, and as you can see, as the dog is approaching the very shallow depth of field, it's getting very close to the camera. You can quite clearly see that the animal IF is bang on point here. Eyes pin sharp, nose out of focus, and that's exactly where it should be when you're working with maximum aperture. So I'm really happy, actually. There was occasionally a drop shot, which you would expect, but as sticky as the A7C. So that's really good. I was really pleased to see all of that.
Yeah, it's good. It's I'm always stunned by how crisp you get those animal shots looking, Mark. It's
me too. That bird shot is amazing.
I need a tutorial.
Yeah, the bird was amazing. It's look, the as good as the A1, I think, on that bird shot. So really nice.
Julia, I don't know if you want to talk about your autofocus experiences now, or should we leave it for a bit later?
I've got a quick little human IAF.
Yeah.
I'll just show it.
Please.
So again, this is on the GM35 1.4. And as you can see, I'm really trying to put the camera through its paces, but the IF is just sticking on my eye. And this is just in stills mode at the moment. Even when I look away and then I cover my face with my hand, the IF just comes right back. And then we also have some examples of the IF working in video mode. This is through the output. And then we have both the output and the final video in that shot as well. And again, in video mode, super sticky.
Yeah, love the way you did the overlay there. It's really instructive. Okay, cool. Well, look, let's jump ahead then and talk a little bit about some of the video features on this camera, because it is a hybrid. One of the things, and Ben, I'm glad we can finally get to you. This is more your jam. We've got a 7K worth of sensor being downsampled into a 4K output. How have you found the output from the camera, Ben?
Oh, it's amazing. Especially being downsampled from 7K makes the 4K even better. So, but yeah, all the footage that I've ran through the computer and tested, like, it's just coming up so beautiful. And
you shot a lot on the 7S already. I know, like that's kind of your daily
Yeah.
drive. How have you found it by comparison?
I actually found it very similar. I couldn't tell much of a difference. Like I mean, I didn't get enough time with the camera to really like stretch the footage or anything, but from like just looking straight up at it, it seemed like the quality was as good as the A7S III, and that's what you want. So
Yeah, that's exactly what you want.
sick.
Exactly.
Could even be a handy little backup camera for me one day or something.
Yeah, nice. You right there, Rambo?
I think my mic's a bit loud.
Good. So the other thing that is really exciting in terms of just raw output on this camera is that 4K 60p, having the option of, a bit of slow motion. I know, Pat, you got some great sample footage from that. Did you want to talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I've got a little bit of footage from my review, but the 4K 60 as a headline feature is, I mean, it's just stunning, isn't it? Like, it's oversampled from 4.6K, and I really thought that, I was really scared with how sharp it would end up being and what the actual quality would look like. Because sometimes, 4K 60 footage kind of degrades a little bit depending on, what camera you shoot it on. And I was really worried about that. But it's so buttery smooth and it looks fantastic, especially with all the other features that come with it, like the 10-bit and 422 and that kind of stuff. And the crop isn't actually as bad as I was originally expecting it to be. It's actually super fine when it comes to how much it crops in. If you're using let's say for example you're using a 35mm lens, then a 1.5 times crop is probably not as bad as most people would think it is, because if you're shooting slow-mo anyway, you're going to be typically shooting a little bit further away. You're not going to be like vlogging in 4K 60 unless you want to do that. But to each their own. But yeah, I mean, it's actually extremely usable, and in terms of quality, just as good as the S3, and it looked fantastic. So I was super pumped with it.
Yeah, beautiful.
I didn't even notice the crop when I was shooting 4K 60. So
It's a really
I didn't know there was a
high-quality
crop.
S35.
Yeah. Oop, why am I suddenly? Hello, everybody.
The Sean show.
Sean's the hero now.
Excuse me. I've
Sean's got
really
Live stream fun.
professional
yeah.
live streamer we are right here.
Nice, you're back.
We're back, baby. What was I saying? Yeah, look, it is really cool to see, that close to A7S level quality in the slow motion. We also, of course, have 10-bit 422. We've got the all intro encoding, H.265 as well, which is really nice. I think most people aren't yet editing with H.265. It is a lot more processor intensive, but it's definitely a future-proofing thing. H.265 seems to be where we're all headed. And on top of that, you've got your S-Cinetone, your creative looks, and the extra dynamic range with S-Log3. I mean, Ben, I know you do a lot of grading. How have you found those color spaces in terms of editability?
I absolutely love the 15 stops dynamic range. Like that's dynamic range when shooting video for me is like it's almost everything. Just to retain all the highlights and shadows, and it also gives it a much more cinematic look when you do grade. So I always shoot like the S-Log3 with that high dynamic range. But when it does come to like quick turnaround, and when I've got clients that want me to send them a video or even give it to them on the day, I'll just switch it to S-Cinetone, and then they get just a beautiful, like already graded image straight up with great dynamic range. And I've actually done that a few times for clients, so it's super helpful. It's a great feature. Like even though I grade a lot of my footage with S-Log, I still definitely benefit from having a Cinetone every now and then. So awesome features to have.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, I echo that as well with the S-Cinetone thing. I love S-Cinetone. It's so convenient.
It's
so
good.
good out of camera.
I'm using S-Cinetone right now.
So am I.
It's just so nice. It's so nice when you don't want to have to think about color, right? You just want to go like, I just want it to look like good.
Good.
Just don't make me think. Don't make me work.
Good.
Yeah, no, it's my favorite crutch. In terms of AF, just going back to that for movie mode, of course, Julia, I know you've already talked about how nice it is to sort of have that as both stills and video. Yeah, I mean, was there anything else? I know you had a chance to try out the Bird IAF. Was that something that you wanted to
I
talk a bit more
did.
about? Or
Mark's shots were really impressive with the bird. I don't have any examples to show on the live stream, but I did do some bird photography in my video. I was also using the 200 to 600, and I tried it out with the 2x teleconverter as well, and it worked just as well with the teleconverter too. I had like this massive pelican just fly right in front of my lens, so that was really good to get some shots of that. And I also tried the 400mm f2.8 because I currently have it borrowed from Sony, which is an amazing lens. And I was shooting some kangaroos that came by as well. And again, in stills and video, the IAF worked really, really good. I caught this really cool shot of the kangaroo just hopping through the frame as I was tracking it with the lens, and just the IAF was bouncing along with the kangaroo. I was really happy with that shot.
Rambo, I know you haven't had much of a chance to talk here. How's your experience been on the autofocus for the new model?
Yeah, it's amazing. I shot a surf session in the water the other day with the 50mm f1.2, and I thought it would be fun just to shoot the whole thing at f1.2 and just give it a whirl. And yeah, every single frame that I had was like tack sharp. And I accidentally left the face recognition on, which was that me again?
You're good, mate.
I accidentally left the face recognition on, which I usually would turn off for surfing because, there's stuff going everywhere and things are super confusing. But I was amazed by how well that worked. It was just locking on, perfectly every time. So, yeah, I was really, really, really stoked with how the autofocus worked for action, for sure. Beautiful.
I guess there are some extra video features that are quite unique to the A7 Mark IV and have really debuted there. So, we've got things like breathing compensation. How have you guys found that for video shooting? I'm going to put someone on the spot here. I know, Julie, you did a really good bit on the breathing compensation.
I did. I tried it out with the GM35. Again, all my tests are on the GM35. It's my favorite lens. But I have like a little side-by-side shot of what it looks like with breathing compensation off and then on. And it does actually make a really big difference in the way the bokeh and the background moves as you're walking towards and away from the lens. It has a little bit of a crop when you're using focus breathing compensation, but it's very minimal. You can't really tell even with the two frames side by side.
Quick question here from Dion Chapman. What does a phase detection autofocus work down to? Is it f8 or better than that? The extinction on the autofocus is f22. Bit further than f8. It's actually one of the great things about especially using teleconverters on this system. If you're used to shooting on DSLR, then you know that your autofocus is going to kick out somewhere around f11, depending on what lens you're using. Could be a lot lower than that. But yeah, with ours, you can just keep shooting all the way down to very narrow apertures.
And that's really good for motorsports, where you're wanting to slow the shutter speed down to maybe 1/250th, and to get some movement drag behind the cars or bikes, and it's a sunny day. You're going to have to shut down to f16 at least, to get that shutter speed that you need. Obviously, you're not going to be putting ND filters on the front of your 400mm GM. Well, you can put them down the back, but I don't own any to put in that little drawer. I must get around to buying one of those.
Get your 42.5mm filters, and another one that was really interesting is the focus map, which shows areas that are in focus, in front of the plane of focus, behind the plane of focus. Mark, you had a bit of a play around with that one, I know.
Yeah. I've got a little demonstration if you want me to show that.
Please, and thank you.
Okay, let's just move over, find it. Where is it? There you go. So this is going to, I have the, basically, I think it sits in the FN menu for movie without doing anything. So I think that's where I picked it up. Don't hold me to that one. But I've got a little diagram on the right to say the blue is behind and the orange and red is in front. And I'll just play that. I'm actually using the new feature called Focus Assist, which allows you to override the autofocus. So it's a bit like DMF for video, I suppose, is the easiest way to explain it to a stills shooter. So there I am punching through to the middle and then punching back to the distant. So I think it's really great. I've had a few people asking me whether I would use it for stills. I'm not too sure about that, but yeah, it's something that I could try, I presume.
Has anyone else been having a play around with it? How have you guys found it in practice?
I've never seen that feature before. It's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm just like, wow, that's so cool.
I mean, it's super. I mean, obviously you've got stuff like focus peaking that's already been out there for a while, and like there are professional tools that have that kind of effect. But yeah, first time we've really seen something exactly like that.
I think it was really good that it worked with Focus Assist, which I didn't know was a feature on the Cineline cameras, where you just, your camera's in AFC, but you just punch in and pull focus, you let go, and then the autofocus kicks back in. So it's great. So it's an alternative just to touch focus, pulling focus. I should probably mention, you may have been going to mention it, but there's 7 speeds of pulling focus by touching the screen now, not just the 3 that the A7 III users would have had.
Yeah. No, look, I wasn't going to mention it, but it is cool to have that that level of control, right? Like it's nice to have really fine-grained things, and especially I think with that override, because it's that weird. You got a very interesting interface between manual and automatic. There's obviously going to be a bit of a learning curve on that for people who are trying to do predictable focus pulls, that sort of stuff.
I used to use it I used to use DMF all of the time before Animal IAF was a thing. Otherwise you just get lots of noses sharp and eyes soft. So you'd always be punching back a little bit, letting the autofocus do the lion's share of the work and then just pushing it further back. And so this is basically a similar sort of feature for video, I suppose.
Yeah, Ben, you obviously you shoot day in, day out. I mean, how much are you shooting auto and how much are you shooting manual these days?
It's a lot of it. It's half and half at the moment, I think. Anytime I'm shooting like tracking people, which I've been doing a lot recently, just like walking around with a gimbal, it's always autofocus. I think I rely on autofocus so much with the Sony cameras, and especially one like this, because they hit all the time. Like I don't usually get like shots where they miss. But at the same time, recently I've had to shoot a lot myself because I've been in COVID. So I've been setting up tripods and putting things in manual focus and focus pulling like that as well. And that's why that feature, the focus compensating thing, was really, really cool to test out. Yeah, I use probably 50-50, I'd say. I use auto and manual. Yeah,
great. I guess the one other thing that's worth mentioning is that gyroscopic data that gets captured by the 7 Mark IV. So something we've seen on the 7S and the FX3, FX6. But yeah, the camera records all the movement that happens while you're shooting with it, and then you can do stabilization through Catalyst Browse. So you can kind of add post-stabilization in as well if you want that extra smooth footage.
And it's free software.
And it's free. It's right.
And it's also really nice. Good too. Super high quality when it comes to the stabilization. You'd be freaking out about like how it almost looks gimbal like when you're using it in Catalyst Browser.
I'm sure there are some very smooth walkers who could probably pull off and fool people that it's not on a gimbal.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what people do with it, to be honest, because that's right. Someone's got some steady hands and they can do something amazing, I'm sure. In terms of just camera operation, there's been a lot of upgrades there as well. Just the camera body itself has changed a lot since the 7 Mark III. And of course, some of that is stuff that's been inherited from the 1, the 9, or the cameras that have sort of come to that higher end before it. But some of the stuff is also completely new. Mark, I know you've been sort of doing a lot of documentation on that. Did you want to have a bit of a chat through some of that?
Yeah, I just if you punch through to this slide, you can basically see that I tested it. There's been a lot of wet spring weather here in Melbourne, so I basically shot for 3 hours in the rain. I didn't know how much weather sealing there was until I saw the official Sony video, and it looks like a healthy amount of weather sealing. Fortunately for me, I suppose. So that's great. I mean, I think they did cut a few corners with the A7 III, compared to say the A7R3 on how much of the body was magnesium alloy and how much weather sealing it got. But I think Sony have been learning from all of the weak spots, the Achilles heel, which I think used to be the battery door and the car door, and I think they've made this one pretty much weatherproof. But
yeah,
yeah.
Sorry.
I
was just going to say I had the same experience where I also had to shoot for like 3 hours in the rain with the A7 IV, and it was fine. It was very wet while I was shooting with it, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's obviously I couldn't see this, so I actually had to grab this from Sony's website, and I didn't know whether there was 1 or 2 Beyond's XR processors, but obviously it's this processor is running all of the AI algorithms. There'll be somebody out there saying, why can't I have bird IF on my A7 III? Why can't I have AF tracking? And of course, you'd have to do open heart surgery on those cameras to push in a Beyond's XR processor to support that amount of AI technologies that Sony's been doing a lot of work on. Of course, you can see what would normally be the C1 key on the top is now that little red movie button, which is very easy to find. So no one's going to be criticizing that placement. But you can just use that as a custom key for stills, and it'd be a movie button only when you switch to movies, which obviously you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. You've got the movie and the stills and the S and Q, slow and quick. Was it a slow and quick function on the A7 III? Did it have a
not in as many words?
Yeah, not as many words. No.
Yeah.
So it's great just having manual and then switching between manual movie and manual stills is really quite good. So.
Excellent. How about Rambo? I know you've been taking it out into the surf, which is a unique experience here, I think. How's your experience been with the body?
As far as the weather sealing goes, or
I hope you haven't been using the weather sealing.
No. I've been babying it. I haven't been like these guys, man. I've been.
I had no choice.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, you got to try, especially it's not your camera.
No, I guess I mean not so much in terms of the weather sealing, but just in terms of the body changes.
Yeah, one thing I really like is the way that they've moved that dedicated record button for the video from the back. I mean, obviously you can sort of customize everything, but sort of straight out of the box, that feels so much more natural to me. Just to go back and forth from stills to video, because I don't really shoot a lot of video, but it'll often just be like something's happening. I'll take a photo and be like, oh, I can get a quick bit of video of that at the same time. So. It's really nice to be able to just sort of jump back and forward if you need to like that.
And the great supporting feature for just pressing that movie button when you're actually shooting stills is you can have a completely different set of camera settings for shooting movie. So the profile will automatically come in if you've selected that as the camera subset for shooting video. So that's great. As well as having the movie button, you're going to have that great ability to switch between settings.
Yeah, it's definitely an unreal setup for someone that's hybrid shooting for sure. I think it's probably one of the better hybrid cameras for sure.
Yeah.
And I know this is a sort of divisive one, but you've got the new vari-angle screen instead of the tilt screen. I know. Julia, not your favorite.
I definitely prefer the tilt screen for photography.
Yeah, which you can't please everyone. What about you? Like Pat, Ben, what's your feeling on the vari-angle? You love it, hate it?
Oh, I love it. For video, it's great because if you're doing like filming yourself and you want to see what you look like, you just flip the screen. So it's for video, I think it's amazing. It's a must-have.
Yeah, look, I learned to love it with the A7C. It wasn't an initial love at first sight thing, but when I learned that I could shoot round corners for street photography, and also I only own very short tripods that are about knee high, and so when I'm doing astrophotography, I'd either have to lie on the ground or do something really weird. But now you just flip it around because I don't do selfies, but I can flip it around and look down at the stars. So so it's great. I can get away with carrying my 1 foot high tripods around.
Yeah, I just feel like there's so much more versatility what you can do with it, because the other ones were quite limited as far as you couldn't turn it at 90 degrees, for example. Whereas now I can sort of hold the camera right above my head and still sort of see what's going on. Or like Mark says, you can be looking directly down on it.
I definitely feel what I definitely feel what Julius said in that when you just want that little tilt down or the little tilt up, it is nice to have the original tilt screen. But yeah, like you guys say, if you need that full articulation, variangle's where you got to go. Of course, we've got the new dual SD card and the CF Express Type A. I know a few of you guys in the predictions video were looking for dual Type A CF Express, which we did get. But having that extra speed is obviously a huge boon in terms of just clearing the buffer and getting that throughput. I mean, do you guys feel like you're limited on buffer these days, or are we just living in a wonderland where it's not even an issue?
Not for video.
Not for video.
Yeah, the buffer certainly wasn't the limit on this camera. It's interesting coming from the A1 where you're looking at that 250 shot range, and if you're shooting motorsports, you sometimes have to slow down a bit because you can see the next couple of riders coming. I'm talking about pre-COVID, of course. The Australian GP was cancelled. So, but yes, you're always looking at that, watching that vertical white line. So I suppose it's nice for people. Some people will obviously want to shoot more than 10 frames per second. I had a couple of comments about that. Obviously, the frames per second will slow down if you're shooting uncompressed RAW, but I don't actually know any sports shooters that shoot uncompressed RAW. That's sort of a landscape type format for me, where you're really going to try and stretch out that histogram, or you're shooting in really low light with your sort of minor edits, for action sports. I defy anyone to find me a compression artifact when shooting compressed RAW. So really it is a 10 shot when the camera's still, and an 8 shot frames per second when the camera's panning. I think to say that it would slow down to 6 or 3 is why would you shoot uncompressed sport? I just don't really understand that.
Yeah, it is probably a pretty edge case. So I guess one last piece that goes to that hybrid camera thing is the streaming capability. So of course we have stills, we've got video, but the camera is great for streaming. And I know, Pat, you really put the camera through its paces on the streaming side of things.
Yeah, the other week I streamed for 2 hours on YouTube, just really casually, checking out all of the different modes and all of the different resolutions and frame rates and stuff like that. And I think, the live streaming feature should be maybe renamed as like webcam or something, because you can use it for anything, like anything webcam related. Doesn't necessarily need to be streaming. But for streaming specifically, everything was so good. HD wise, like HD 30, HD 60 is just so on point and exactly what you would expect it to be. It's kind of like one of those features where you plug it in and you're like, but of course it works this way. Like it just makes so much sense. And it was flawless. It looked amazing. You get that full frame quality and all the bokeh and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, especially for people who are video conferencing every day, this kind of setup and this ease is just so good. And then one thing that I loved specifically was that, I was able to attach this mic straight into the XLR adapter, straight into the digital hot shoe, and then get both audio and video in one single cable, which is amazing because, if you're into live stream, you usually have like a big DAC or like all these different audio levels and all that kind of stuff. And with this, it's just like one USB cable and that's it, and you're done. And it's great.
Yeah, it's the dream, right? I mean, I hang on. I'm going to see if I can lift up my DAC and show it to the audience without spilling my drink here. Hello, DAC. There you are. With little lights flashing.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's a pain. It's not an ideal setup. So yeah, that's right. Having everything in one cable and it's just simple, and you plug it in. Lovely.
Yeah, so good.
You were saying 4K. You found maybe not quite your speed for streaming.
Look, like ideally, it would be nice if because most people are going to stream at 1080p nowadays or 1440p. So it's nice to have a 4K feed come down sampled into either 1080 or 1440. But the 15p is a bit choppy. Like it is literally like half the frame rate of 30, right? Which is what you're going to be streaming at most of the time.
Maybe something you want to use more for like a progress thing or something where you're really focused on detail more than motion.
Right. Yeah. And there was, I mentioned in the review that if you have your feed as a very small part of the overall image, then it's not as bad. It's not as noticeable. But once it's full screen, that half kind of frame rate is quite noticeable. But that being said, like the HD30, HD60 is like it's spot on enough anyway that it's just gonna carry all that weight of the quality anyway. So maybe they have an update in the future, maybe they don't, but it's good as it is, definitely. But yeah 4K would be nice.
Well, look, I think that's obviously there's a million features in this camera. Anyone who's and you guys have all done some amazing work putting it through its paces and documenting that stuff. So I encourage anyone who's watching this stream tonight to check out these guys' reviews. They're really, really excellent. But we do have some Q&As, I believe. So I'm just going to wait a moment. We'll just chuck a few on screen and we might try and answer any questions that have come up during the stream. Okay, so we're going from Slay. I would like to ask, as no one is ever talking, how does the camera work in concert photography and maybe comparing to A7 Mark III? Okay, that's a very specific one. Has anyone done any shooting that would be close to concert type photography or maybe event? I guess it's pretty tough.
I didn't, but I could comment that the camera's low light AF capability is a full one-stop. Less light, it can still track focus with half the amount of light that the A7 III would need. So theoretically, it should be much better.
Yeah, I mean, definitely you'd have to imagine the eye autofocus, all that sort of stuff is going to really hold up beautifully there. Question from the This was from we had asked for some questions from Instagram. So this is from our posts earlier. What's the maximum S&Q frame rate? So we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but in 4K, maximum frame rate 60 frames per second, and in full HD, you're going to get up to 120. So that's for slow and quick motion, that's your options. For quick motion, you can go all the way down to 1 frame per second at a 60 frames per second output. Next question we got from Instagram was, what are the external recording capabilities like Atomos via HDMI? I'm just gonna quickly solo myself since
I was using the Atmos for my human IAF video.
Oh, great. Maybe you can field this one for me.
And it outputs, I think it's 4K because you can see super nice quality. So that's with the Atmos Ninja V.
Yep.
And then in video mode, I believe you can output it to 3 different places. don't know if Sean, you want to fact check me on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Well, yeah. So I mean, essentially, all the frame rate modes you can capture in camera, you can output over HDMI. So there's no real difference. You know, if you're shooting 4K at 60, you can output 4K at 60. It's just a question of what your recorder can ingest.
I pulled up a couple of examples of would you believe, another dog running.
Mark,
it sort of speaks to the I'll just switch over so you'll go full screen on this. Of course, you can't really get access. Well, I would normally process the files through Adobe Lightroom, but a Sony Imaging Edge could see the ARW files. So this is me lowering the exposure so I can not lose the highlight detail. So this speaks to the 15-stop dynamic range. But when I opened up the shadows, you can see it's still tracking the dog's eye. So that might speak to low light concert as well, where your subjects might be very shadowy. It seems to be rich in detail right down in the deep shadows. If you compare that to the standard out of camera shot to the process shot. So that's cool.
Still has really nice colors as you're lifting the shadows as well, which is
nice. Look, I have to say the Imaging Edge for really aggressively processing a raw file isn't my favorite, so I'll be keen to see the raw files in Lightroom, but it does show you that there's plenty of detail down there in the deep shadows, and it's good quality information.
Dean Does Stuff has asked, does this camera have dual ISO for video like the A7S III? So the short answer is yes. It does have an ISO break. It's a little bit lower than the S Mark III. So the S Mark III kicks in at quite high ISOs, whereas it's 3200 is the turnover for the Mark IV, I believe. And so you don't, with the S Mark III, it gets quite noisy, and then you hit that second ISO and the noise floor drops, and it's quite noticeable as you go a step up. With the 7 Mark IV, it's not quite as much of a sort of changeover. I don't know if anybody else has sort of got first-hand experience with that. They can comment to it. But
I noticed that as well, just with like general street shooting at night. It has a lot more like mid-range ISO usability. And I found that quite nice because especially like, low light and, you're trying to get people walking or like using a fast shutter and stuff like that. That actually does make quite a difference in the real world. But yeah, especially even for video, like it cleans up really nice. And definitely a stark contrast in terms of, comparing that to the 7 III.
Yeah, beautiful. I think we missed a question. Okay, there we go. So another one that came in from Instagram just asking, does the 7 Mark IV have a gyroscopic data? I mean, we addressed it earlier, but yeah, absolutely. Just like the S Mark III, FX3, FX6, it captures that gyroscopic data and you can smooth things out in Catalyst Browse. And what is the flash sync speed? 1/250th of a second. Easy question. So high quality mechanical shutter, 1/250th of a second. Don't have the crazy stuff like on the Alpha 1, but rock solid. You can't complain about 1/250th. Just see if we've got any more coming in here. Does the Alpha 7 Mark IV have focus stacking? Sadly not. Look, if you want to do focus stacking at this stage, you're still looking at doing it manually. Although you do at least have some nice tools. I could definitely see that focus map being a really handy thing for doing focus stacking, especially because it can show you as you change your F number how that depth of field changes. Question about what's the size difference from the Alpha 7 Mark III, specifically curious for underwater housings. Rambo, what do you reckon? Is it going to fit in the same housing?
Not without some modifications, no. It's like a bit thicker through the grip. And maybe like a touch wider overall as well. I tried to jam mine in a few different model housings. I got it in the A7R4 housing, but I had to pull it's actually a little bit bigger than the A7R4 in some parts of the dimensions somewhere. So I had to pull a few things out of there and and throw a sponge in there to kind of like keep it in the right spot. So yeah, I think it depends. Some housings you can get a different backplate for them, so then you can customize to buttons, but it's not going to just fit stock into any other housing, though. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I had that trouble too with the A7S. I had to really jam it in there a little bit. It's almost the same size, but not quite.
Yeah, there are just a few sort of subtle differences on those Gen 4 bodies. So yeah, you definitely got to check that before you buy. Let's see what else we got here question wise. Oh, okay, this is a good one for the Brains Trust. What's the best G Master to pair with this camera if you could only pick one?
GM 35 1.4, hands down for me.
+1 on that, definitely.
Didn't even need to think about it.
It's too easy.
God, this is too easy.
Yeah,
I'm going.
I'm going to push a bit longer. I'll go the 135 GM.
I'm going the 50mm 1.2.
That's what I got on this one.
Yeah, dreamy. It's dreamy.
Yeah. When you said you shot everything at 1.2, I was going to say, are there any other apertures on that 50mm? When I reviewed it, I just left it on 1.2. Somebody accused me. I took it to a triathlon event, and somebody accused me of anchoring the cyclists still because they couldn't believe I was tracking those cyclists at f1.2.
What about you, Ben? You're the last one we haven't heard from.
I have a 16 to 35, and it's the only G Master I own. So that's it. Yeah,
that's
great for
your pick?
vlogging. 35 is beautiful. I love the 35 2.8. I use that a lot, and it gives me some great results. So, but you can't go wrong with there's too many good choices when it comes to G Masters. Like,
yeah.
I mean, if I had another one, I'd probably say that. So, they're all great.
It's true. Yeah, look, they're a brick house for sure. Steve Owens in the chat asks, are you able to suggest a pairing lens for vlogging on the 7 Mark IV? Don't know if anyone wants to jump on that one.
Oh,
I personally, I love using prime lenses. So I use the G20 1.8 is really nice. And if you want a little bit more budget, the Sony 28 2.8 is really good too.
I reckon 16 to 35 is great too, because you got that wide reach if you want to hold it up and look back on yourself and do some talking. I use that a lot when I'm doing vlogs, and it's great. Like, you can see everything. It's really nice.
If you want to save yourself some money as well, the F4 version has stabilization, which is great for vlogging too. So that's also a consideration.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Excellent suggestions. Curly Mullet asks, how different is it from the Sony ZV-E10?
Well, this is full frame.
Mm-hmm.
That's
so pretty
one
different.
big difference.
Yep.
You don't have a finder on the ZV-E10, do you?
No, you don't.
So that
depends
for
what you're
me,
shooting.
I do like getting almost onto the ground and shooting from the monitor when I can. But for a lot of sport action, you have to have the finder to your eye as you're panning, especially those MotoGP bikes moving at 300 kilometers an hour. You can't pan on the monitor. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're talking about different format, like different sensor format, very different form factor for the body. But it's very, very different.
What I'd like Sony to be able to do is to, on that multi-interface shoe, is create a finder that people can plug in. So people that have a camera like a ZV-E10 can repurpose it. If there was ever a new A7C R with a high resolution sensor, it was criticized for having quite a low, small resolution finder. But, I reckon that multi-interface shoe could take something nice.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's also been, a lot of people who are keen on A7C R, like you say, something high resolution in that body, just because it's a different body format. We haven't offered it previously in full frame, and of course, if you are interested in a small compact camera that you can take anywhere, but you're more interested in high resolution, it'd be something different. Anyway, we can keep wishing. I think we just have one more question coming. Here we go. So, question from Will Pembroke: is the low light better than the A7 Mark III for Astro?
I didn't get
Mark,
to
you think
test
you
it.
might be,
Yeah,
yeah.
I expect it would be, but we had a very wet period when I was when I had the camera for review. I think we had like 1 or 2 days where it wasn't raining, so didn't get to test it. And I wasn't allowed to go more than 15 kilometers from Melbourne either, so that's sort of
You're not going to get out of the light pollution that way.
Yeah, no, I couldn't even escape the light pollution.
Might be a TBC on that one, unless anyone's managed to have a chance to shoot it for Astro.
No, not me.
No.
A7 IV versus A7R Mark III. Opinions?
Yeah, I'd go the A7 IV.
Yeah, A7 IV. It's more
Yeah,
versatile.
the AF tracking. Once you've got experienced the AF tracking algorithms, you're not going to go back to lock on AF.
100%.
And the colors are so beautiful as well.
And then you've got all the extra features, the video features, and like the vlogging and the plug and play and everything like that, for sure.
Yeah. And the image quality is like pretty, par on.
The R's already dead. It's fine. All right, guys. Look, thanks very much for tuning in. It's been excellent to have you all along. You've been fantastic panelists. So thanks so much for your time, guys. For everyone who's watching, let me just solo myself, professional live streamer. Hello. For everyone who's watching, if you haven't already checked out these guys' channels, they are in the descriptions. I absolutely encourage you to check them out because these guys make fantastic content, each in their own right. So do check that out. Otherwise, thanks for joining us tonight. It's been great to have you along. I'm going to give everyone a chance to wave goodbye as we head off.
Bye. Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks for jumping in.
Take it easy.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Cheers.
I can't find the end the broadcast button. See you later, guys.
Story
Bye-bye.
time.
Bye.
Cheers.